Let's talk about some comments that my co-host on the Jets Collective made. He actually didn't make these comments though on our podcast. He made these comments to Steve Overmeyer of CBS2. They do a weekly Sunday night Jet show. Rich is always a guest on there. And this was a comment that Rich Cimini made. I want to play it and get your take, Omari, because I have a lot to say about what Rich said to Steve.
Rich Cimini, what is the one thing that Jets fans have gotten wrong?
Steve, I think the one thing they've gotten wrong is that they're way down on Aaron Glenn. Like he's in over his head. I think it's too soon to say that. I think he had some mistakes last year. He recognizes those. He addressed them in the offseason. He surrounded himself with a better coaching staff, tweaked his approach to training camp. So let's give the guy a chance in year two.
So let's give the guy a chance in year two. Well, the first thing I'll say is he's getting the chance. I mean, he wasn't fired. He got to rehire his whole coaching staff. So he's certainly getting the chance. Omari, your thoughts on Rich's comments?
Yeah, I'm always going to try to, toe the line because I think that respect, the benefit of the doubt, all of that stuff is earned. And Aaron Glenn didn't earn that during his first year. It was one of the worst years in history for football, not even just Jets football, in football. He's on a list with Hugh Jackson. And outside of, being a good man off the field, there's not too many lists in terms of being a head coach that you want to share with Hugh Jackson, who was arguably terrible during his stint with the Cleveland Browns. Now, again, what I'll give Glenn credit for is that he was able to pivot. He got rid of Tanner Engstrand. He got rid of Steve Wilkes. He got a new quarterback in here. He insulated himself with Frank Reich. So now he can just focus on the defense. Now he's going to call the defense. Again, he was able to bring in some guys instead of trying to, build a house with different pieces and different parts. He has parts that he's familiar with that he wants to. So his fabric, the fabric of his identity is going to be sprinkled into this team. But again, I don't think that Jets fans, listen, when I speak to Jets fans and they say that they are out on Aaron Glenn, I don't try to correct them because they saw what they saw and they can feel how they feel. So I don't think that Jets fans are too down on Aaron Glenn. This is what Aaron Glenn showed. So if I'm going to judge you, like Jake, just like we always say, when we meet people, we take them at face value. So if you show me nothing but support and you're a great dude. So at that, anytime somebody asks me about Jake Asman, I always say he's a great guy. Hopefully it's the same for me. But again, when people ask me about Aaron Glenn, I say I have questions and I have concerns because I watch some of the worst football that I've ever seen in my life as a Jets fan.
I think that's well said. My big thing is he hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt, you're right. But also just the way this offseason went about, it's not like we could point to, well, he clearly learned from this because he did this. Like there's been some in the media. I'm not saying Rich is doing this. I'm just saying there's been a narrative put out by some that, Aaron Glenn is going down with the ship. Look, he's taking over play calling on defense. Look, he's being nicer to the media, which somehow means he's going to win more games. Like there's too many things that have been put out there to imply that, okay, last year, it didn't happen or it wasn't as bad as it looked. Like, the last 5 games, what did you expect? And they conveniently leave out, well, they started 0-7. Right? And with the defensive stuff, I think what has frustrated me this summer in multiple interviews, Aaron Glenn has tried to say his biggest mistake last season was letting Steve Wilkes call the defense. He hired him to be his DC. But if everyone remembers how this offseason started, Aaron Glenn once again tried to get Wink Martindale to be his defensive coordinator, a different person to be the DC before Glenn was forced by Woody Johnson to take over those responsibilities. So I just feel like for those looking for things to say, well, he learned from it and look what he's doing. It's like, yeah, kind of, but it's not like it was like this clear plan. He learned immediately and then he's going out there and he's attacked with this new philosophy. That's where I don't know if I'm wording this the best. That's where I kind of can't fully buy into this new Aaron Glenn when his big plan was to hire Wink Martindale and Woody Johnson put the kibosh on that. So it's tough to listen to him do these reflective pieces with The Athletic that came out today, or do the interview on The Fan with Craig Carton and say his biggest mistake was the defense when we all understand that wasn't your biggest mistake. And that also implies that you knew it was your big mistake and you were going to correct it right away, which he also didn't want to do. He was forced to do it.
Yeah, it seems like he's learning, but he's still trying to shed what he thinks his vision coming into this was supposed to be for a head coach. And again, we have to, we have to learn on the job. Jake, like what you're even with your job right now. There's only 32 of these jobs, and sometimes I think we get caught thinking that there's just a one shoe, one size fits all to being a head coach. There are multiple ways to win in this league. You watch what Sean McVay does, you watch what D'Amico Ryans does, you watch what Liam Cohen does. All of those guys take different approaches, and ultimately, if it leads to winning, nobody's going to question it. But you're right, and I think that what you do, I watched what you and Frankie were talking about, and people were saying that you were being too hard on Glenn. There is nothing wrong with holding people accountable when they try to BS you. And that's sometimes why I don't understand why people that want to be more optimistic get mad at fans that they claim are negative, because I think that you should have a higher standard for your coach. There's only 32 of these jobs. You have to be a special person to be a head coach in the NFL. And I'll say that, but then I'll also say, sometimes we go a little bit too far in both directions. And I try to stay somewhere even keeled and in the middle. That's why I'm on Wednesdays. So I try to keep it. I try to keep it right in the middle. I try to keep it right in the middle. Yes, Aaron Glenn has a ton of things that he needs to work on, and he has done it. Even the training camp is being run differently. People have all these complaints about the intensity of training camp and the soft tissue injuries. What does Aaron Glenn try to do to mitigate that? He does 45-minute practices that are more intense, but shorter in time. So we have to give him credit for the things that he's doing right, but then we can hold him accountable for the things that he's doing that he still needs to work on. So I'm right there with you, Jake. I don't think that I think that as our jobs, and especially you're at the forefront of this. You have one of the largest Jets platforms here. I think that we should raise our standards as fans, and I think that we should hold an organization accountable because they're in the same league as the Seahawks. Why are the Seahawks in a completely different tier than the New York Jets? Both billion-dollar franchises, both have the same amount of resources. Why is one at the pinnacle of the sport, and why is one consistently in the dumpster?
Well said. I also think that if Aaron Glenn didn't play for the Jets, the discourse around him by fans would be so different. It'd be how many felt about Adam Gase, because that's how bad Glenn's first year was. In fact, to be fair to even Adam Gase had a better first year than Aaron Glenn did. Adam Gase started 1-7, and yeah, their 6-2 second half of the year was a little fool's gold against some bad teams and backup QBs, but they still won those games. Like, the Jets started 0-7 with Glenn, and there was no recovering from that. At least Gase's team never fully quit on him like it felt like Glenn's team did over the last 5 weeks of the year. So if Glenn didn't play for the Jets, I think the narrative around him would be different. So again, I don't think anyone's giving up on him like what Rich is saying. I just think we're also going to hold him to a higher standard, and I'm able to separate my love for him as a player and appreciation for what he did as a player and evaluate him as a head coach. And as a head coach, he's presiding over one of the worst seasons ever. Like, I heard a great podcast the other day with Joe Caporoso and Warren Sharp of Sharp Football Analysis, and Warren Sharp said that dating back to 2000, there has never been a team that has trailed more at halftime than the 2025 New York Jets. Like, they were just not competitive for most of their games. I mean, it was an embarrassment at the highest level. They were a one-win team that won 3 games because their special teams was elite. I mean, this team was as bad as any team we've seen in the last 25 years in modern football. So I just can't just forget about that and say, well, he hired Frank Reich and the owner forced him to take over play calling when he wasn't that great in Detroit in the first place at that, and say it's all going to be different this time. I got to see it. Again, he's here, so I'm going to root for him because I'm a Jet fan who wants to see this team be successful. But I can't fault any Jet fan who has doubts. Trust your eyes. We saw what it looked like last year.
Prove us wrong. That's all I say. Prove us wrong. Go down to Tennessee, kick Robert Sala's ass, prove us wrong. I mean, that's the best way. Success is the best way to shut up any of your haters. Success is the best way to quiet any of the doubters and the concerns. So again, that's why I say, listen, I tell people all the time to vote with their dollar. So whether you're going to vote with your dollar and not go to games, or if you're going to support, vote with your dollar. And then also for the coaching side, just prove the doubters wrong. Show up, prepare to play every week, and don't give up. And then I say all that to say it was bad football. I don't even know how they won 3 games. He should get credit after going to practice, Jake, and seeing the bottom 2 quarterbacks perform. it's a surprise. He should get a gold star for not completely losing that locker room, because if I was on that team and I watched you go to the podium and say Brady Cook is an NFL quarterback and he can win football in his games, I would have been mentally checked out. I would have been mentally checked out, even though Brady looked better than Bailey Zappi last week. But, I think everyone around the team understood what they were doing. So that's why I don't really fault what we saw towards the end. Now, the 0-7, that's real. You were trying to win those games. But that last, even the biggest Jets fans and homers didn't even know who some of those guys were.
And just the way they lost some of those games during the 0-7, like it was his coaching that directly led to it. So you could point to that. So we'll see. Obviously, for those, if Rich Cimini saying, it's too soon to say he's over his head, give him a chance. He's getting a chance again. Like it starts week 1. It starts against Robert Saleh. For all of Saleh's faults, he had the Jets at 6-3 and 7-4. That was a playoff roster minus the quarterback. The quarterback prevented them from being a playoff team in 2022. And even Mike White, if he was healthy, I think that would have been good enough for them to still scratch across enough wins at 7-4 to be the 7 seed in the AFC and end the longest playoff drought in sports a couple of years ago. Like, we're not asking for much, but we are asking for you to go out there and win a couple games early on to prove 0-7 is forgotten, and this is a different year.
So, Jake, you're much better at this than me. Just jog my memory. Saleh didn't call plays his first year, correct?
He did not. Jeff Ulbrich did.
He did not. And I believe Saleh had issues with clock management. I remember Bowles having issues with clock management as well, too. So, like I always say, when the bullets are flying and it's your first year as an NFL head coach, most guys do struggle with that. So that's what we're going to be able to see early on. We'll be able to tell. I think the first 3 weeks of the season, we'll be able to tell if Aaron Glenn has learned from his mistakes as a head coach and a CEO and all that from last year. So that's what I want to see. And that's why coaches need to be developed too. And you and I, we've said that on here. So I do want to see the coaching development from Aaron Glenn specifically. How are you using your timeouts? How are you taking advantage of the situations going into a half or starting a half? Do you understand the down and distance? Do you know where you need to be to be in field goal range? Just think like little nuances of the game that when the talent is similar, the roster talent is similar on both sides, that can etch out a win. So that's what we need to look for, because I think going into most of these matchups, Jake, and we could do this exercise before the season starts, how many games are the Jets going to have the coaching advantage in?
Until proven otherwise, you can't say a single one right now, can you?
Single one. Maybe Miami, just because we don't understand what Jeff Hafley is, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Miami. I mean,
maybe Arizona.
I guess, but it's like, I don't know, man. I take those guys in a second. They're offensive minded, and their teams have looked functional so far in the preseason, at least from what we've seen. And they had better resumes as coaching candidates than Glenn did. Even LaFleur had a better resume. Let's be real. We've now seen since what it's looked like post Zach Wilson, and the only quarterback that had any success with LaFleur calling plays was anyone but Zach Wilson. And then LaFleur got to learn under McVay for a couple extra years after he was already with Shanahan. I'd take Mike LaFleur over Aaron Glenn for 1 year right now. I would.
I mean, I would too. I mean, they looked prepared offensively. The offense was flowing. Everything was on time. The plays were getting in with enough time on the play clock. So, yeah, he had a really strong debut. So, again, that's not what you want going into the season, where you don't believe that you have the coaching advantage for 17 games. So that's not what you want.
And then you could say the same thing about the quarterback situation, right? I mean, how many games do the Jets have the advantage at quarterback? I mean, there's probably a couple. Maybe Geno could be better than
Jacoby
the Dolphins or Brissett, or if it's even Brissett at that point, or maybe rookie Fernando Mendoza struggles if he's just starting to play at that point. The Jake Asman Show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Check out PrizePicks right now. If you're a sports fan, they have something for everyone, especially if you're one of my listeners and you're gearing up for the upcoming Jets season. For player picks on PrizePicks, you just pick a player you like and you go more or less on a few of their stats. Check out some of the numbers they have for some of your favorite Jet players: Geno Smith, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Omar Cooper Jr., Kenyon Sadiq, and many more. PrizePicks should be your go-to, and check out their new offer right now. Play your first $5 and get $150 in lineups if you win. All you need to do is sign up and use that code HMA. That's PrizePicks code HMA. Download the app now or click the link in the description. to download the PrizePicks app today. I can never bet on a man's downfall. I hope Glenn takes a massive step forward this year, 8+ wins. And if it falls apart, hey, I get it. Move on. Yeah, no one can say Woody Johnson's not patient if he gives his head coach 2 full years and let's say they win 5 games or they win 6 games. You're talking about 8 wins through 2 years. No one can say you're not patient for wanting to move on before you're in an offseason where you have 3 first-round picks and among the leaders in cap space across the league.
Yeah, it's going to be a desirable destination for no matter what happens. But yeah, Woody's been patient, and I'll be the first to always criticize Woody and criticize any owner that I feel that isn't doing a good job. Excuse me. But yeah, I think it just truly blows my mind that people think that Woody Johnson didn't give Robert Saleh a fair shot or that he didn't give Joe Douglas a fair shot. I think that he's given almost every coach that he's hired a fair shake.
Yeah, I mean, look, in hindsight, firing Saleh at 2-3 was stupid, but the narrative that came out after that he's always impatient with his coaches or Saleh didn't get enough time. The man was in his 4th year. He was 20-36 as an NFL head coach. Joe Douglas was in year 6 of a 6-year contract. Like, Woody showed patience with those guys. It didn't work. I think part of the reason he didn't want to move on from Glenn last year was because of that narrative that formed. And he gave Glenn another season. And here we are, year 2 for Glenn. If it doesn't work out, why would anyone think that Aaron Glenn would still need more time at that point? Like, there's just no way.
Yeah, yeah. There's there's a lot of things that we can criticize Woody for, but I don't think being impatient with the especially these last handful of coaches is one of them. So, but again, I do think we can criticize Woody for the the firms and yeah, I don't know if you could speak on that for for the consultants that he's using to find these coaches. I think he needs to completely revamp how he's going about finding these coaches, though.
I hope he lets Darren Muji hire the next coach. That's my
Yeah.
hope. I think Muji knows enough people around the league, is respected by enough people around the league. I'm more confident in him hiring a coach than I would be Woody trying to do whatever path necessary to find the next coach.
Yeah, I don't want to hear any consultant firms. I don't want any specialized people, and I don't want anybody that failed in the league. We respect to those guys. I'm not sure if you're doing a pregame show with him this year, but we don't need people that were not good at the job that you're trying to hire for.
Oh,
So
yeah.
hopefully we can get away from that.
First
Um,
show, Mike T and I, September 6th, 8 a.m. to noon on ESPN New York. Join in.
so yeah, not to talk bad about your future co-host or your co-host, but yeah, like just let Mike T stick to pre-games with Jake and let Darren Muji find potentially the next coach if it doesn't work out here. So that's one thing I will criticize Woody for.
The deal. Just got no chance unless you click on that like button. And you got to make sure you subscribe to the Jake Asman Show. You don't, you can get the f*** out. Now let's go, Asmaniacs. We're built for this shit.